Welcome to the Good Food CFO podcast. I'm your host, Sarah Delavan, and with me, as always, is our producer, Chelsea Steer. Chelsea, how are you? And what are we getting into today?
Sarah, I am so excited for our listeners to hear this conversation that you had with Sydney, the founder of French Squirrel. But before we get into that, I actually have one more review to share with you this season.
That's a surprise. I'm excited for a review.
Yeah, so this review actually comes from user Larissa072010. We'll call her Larissa from YouTube. And she said, I want to thank you for the incredible content that you share. This episode was extremely insightful and helped me learn concepts and clarify questions that were still a bit unclear for me. Thank you so much for your dedication and for presenting the information in a practical way. And so, Sarah, I think she's actually referring to the cash flow episode here, the rethinking cash flow.
Yeah. Well, I want to say thank you, Larissa, for A, following us on YouTube, and B, for commenting there, because it's very helpful for us, on the platform itself, but also it's so lovely to hear from people, that we don't know personally that are finding our content there. It's a great episode to watch on YouTube because we walk through some models. So I'm really glad that you found it there. And I think most of all, so glad that you found it helpful and clear and practical in its delivery, because that is what we strive to do, right? Is to take complex, difficult to understand concepts around finances and simplify them for people so that they can look at their businesses and go, oh, okay, now I know what I'm looking at, and now I know what I can do with this information, or how to make positive, productive change. So it means a lot to us, and I know it means a lot to you too, Chelsea, to get feedback like this. And it's encouraging to kind of keep doing what we're doing and keep delivering episodes. And we've got a lot of them lined up for season 13. So I'm really excited about that.
Yeah, I think anytime we hear like, oh, this clicked for me, or it wasn't until I listened to this or watched this that I understood this concept, every single time that we hear that, it's exciting, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't get old. I love it. It makes me feel like, okay, we are doing what we are meant to do in the world. I love it.
Yeah.
And I will remind you, as you said, Sarah, right? Like Larissa, thank you so much for leaving your comment and leaving this review. And if you're listening, this is your reminder that leaving comments, subscribing on our YouTube channel, following on Apple, leaving a review there, these are the best free ways for you to support this podcast and what we are doing here. So if you haven't yet, we would love to see your comments, your reviews, and to read them right here on the podcast. And I will also say, if we read your review here on the podcast this season, I personally, and I know you too, Sarah, want to thank you one more time. And here's to all the reviews that we're going to get to read next season.
Looking forward to it.
Yeah. Okay. So, Sarah, back to Sydney and the conversation that we're playing today. I actually would love to start with you telling the audience a little bit about how you guys met. Like, how did you meet Sydney? And
yeah,
that's it. I'm stopping there.
Yeah. So Sydney and I were introduced to one another by Lauren Montgomery, who is the founder of Monty's. She's been on the podcast. Really awesome BABOYOT episode with Lauren. She and Sydney are friends. They spoke about what Sydney was feeling and experiencing in terms of her financials. In particular, she wasn't really able to utilize her financials to make decisions, to understand her business. And so she came to me, to work together, and became a client of Sarah Delavan Consulting. And I don't have favorite clients, right? Like, or at least I'm not supposed to have favorite clients. I love all of them so much, but like for different reasons, different clients are like my favorite. And I think my favorite thing about Sydney was her tenacity and dedication to doing the work and creating the change that she eventually understood needed to be done to move her business forward and make it more financially sustainable. And she shares a lot about the work that we did together in the episode. And I just want to say here that, like, she is, as I said before, one of the most dedicated and I think disciplined founders that I have ever met. She does prioritize rest. She does, travel and do those things. But in the midst of it, she still is very, very focused, and she's willing to do difficult things like finding a new co-packer and, talks about the realities of that. She's willing to recognize when the cost of my product is somewhat out of my control. So what can I do to
Yeah.
get it back under control? Can I tweak the recipe? Can I modify things? What can I do?
And not only does she have that willingness, right? And it's very clear through the conversation. You talk about discipline. I think we could also call it grit, right?
Yeah.
She has a lot of grit.
Yeah.
And she has a mindset that I think is really aspirational for any business founder, not just food founders, but any founder in general, to really take away from this conversation. But one of the things I really loved as I listened to you guys talking was that it also was very clear that she had some really strong ideas about what she wanted to do in her business, and that she really just needed someone to come along and say, yeah, you can do those things. You don't have to do it this other way.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that just unlocked for her this almost like endless runway of possibilities. And I think that was really cool to hear.
Yeah, I think she has I'm sort of picturing like an inner flame, inner fire that is just like 100% BABOYOT. And we've talked about how difficult it can be when you are part of an industry where things are done a certain way, where, people on the outside have opinions about what you should and shouldn't be doing, right? Who know nothing about the industry. There are folks inside of the industry that are going to give you recommendations and advice that just don't sit with you right. And, like we talked about with Keisha from Live Loud Foods in her episode, something that I think Sydney does is gets quiet and goes, do I agree with that? Do I believe that? Or do I think differently? And do I want to do this differently? And just having someone, me for a short period of time, to be there to go, yeah, you can do that, to look at the finances, right? Or to be a bit of a sounding board for her to follow her own like path is very exciting. It's very humbling. It's very gratifying. I'll also share that Sydney is a great founder for fellow founders to follow online on social media. And I don't say that often, but she's very truthful in as much as a social media content can be truthful. She shows the ups and downs. She shows the behind the scenes. And I think that when you're trying to truly be a BABOYOT and build a business on your own terms, having a friend in the industry, even if it's through, an Instagram or a TikTok platform, you can feel a little bit less alone. You can feel encouraged by her. And I think that that's a really cool thing that she's offering to the community, in addition to what she's offering in this episode.
Yeah, there is a lot in this episode for founders to listen to take away. And I think we should just get right to it.
Yeah, let's do it. I want to take a moment to thank our BABOYOT members whose contributions have supported the continued production of this podcast. Whether you are a one-time, monthly, or annual member, your contributions are helping us to grow our impact. And together, we are changing the way that food business is done. If you want to learn more about our BABOYOT membership, how it supports this podcast and our impact, and to learn about the exclusive perks like live Q&As, member events, bonus content, beta testing new tools, and more, you can visit thegoodfoodcfo.com/BABOYOT. That's BABOYOT. Now back to the show. Sydney, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Sarah. Thank you for having me.
I'm so looking forward to our conversation today because I'll share with our listeners. You were a consulting client with Sarah Delavan Consulting for about a year. And I don't think I've ever said this to you, but I really admired the way that you utilized our consulting time together. And I thought you made so much, there was like so much growth, so much learning, so much that you did with the guidance, which like it was all you. And I was just there to sort of support you. And I wanted to invite you here to talk about that journey sort of from your point of view and to share, I think, some of the lessons maybe that you learned along the way with our listeners who I know are in very similar situations or will be, at some point in their business. So thank you for coming here to talk about all of that with me.
Oh my God, that was so sweet. I thank you. You definitely did guide me, and even if you didn't think that, you were. I know. Thank you for saying that. It was a lot of it was me, but a lot of it was you. So thank you.
Teamwork, right?
Yeah, teamwork.
Collaboration.
And I think, yeah, that this whole last year has been wild, but something that I've learned, and the reason why I actually found you. So how I found you was
Yeah.
that I, as a food founder, a CPG food founder, I feel that there is not enough representation for founders, business owners in the food space, where there's an intersection between finance and food,
Right.
or just actually specialization in the food business. Like, I think one of the most frustrating things is getting opinions on finances or anything related to the food business when you don't know the food business. It
Yeah.
is so hyper specific, it is so niche that if you don't know it, there can actually be a lot of mishaps.
Yeah.
Like, people will lead you in the wrong direction if you don't know the food business.
I fully agree with that. 100%. Why don't we take a moment and tell folks about your business, French Squirrel, and how you found yourself launching a food business?
Yes. So I call it a happy accident because I didn't even mean to start this business, but it was born out of my own health journey with PCOS, hormone imbalances, and I couldn't find a sweet snack that satisfied my sweet craving, but then also didn't spike my blood sugar.
Right.
And we started this business 4 years ago. We do healthier sweet snacks. So that's date peanut butter, protein bites, stuffed dates, cereal clusters, and everything is made with real sugar, just less of it. So we find that there are a lot of companies doing things with sugar alcohols claiming zero sugar. And then there are a lot of companies that are loading things with sugar. That is most of our country. But the middle ground doesn't really exist. And that's where we kind of come into play, which is the lower sugar refrigerated dessert type category.
Yeah. I have to say that your peanut butter is the greatest. And I gifted it last year as Christmas presents to like my team and some people in the family. And I know with 100% certainty that if there's not another jar or two of your peanut butter in their Christmas boxes this year, they're going to be disappointed.
Oh
But
my
really,
God.
all of your things are really delicious. Just I want to let people know that and they're not too sweet and they're just very satisfying. Also, like the date bites. It's like when you finish that date, you're like, that's perfect. I'm
Right.
satisfied,
Which is the French way of life, and that's where the French
Mm,
aspect comes into play. Like, the French do not. It's not a whole bowl of popcorn and like this whole thing of trying to like fill a bowl of a bunch of stuff. It's
yeah,
actually a little piece of something or a little bite of this, and it's satisfying enough to the point where you don't need a whole bag of chips. Like, and
yeah,
that's where that's the difference between the French and the American mindset, in my
yeah.
opinion. But thank you. The peanut butter was our latest launch, in terms of product lines. We did a new flavor of cereal clusters last week, but the date peanut butter was more of just a line extension. I wasn't expecting it to take off as it has, and now it's the second bestseller on Amazon for us and our website. So
Amazing.
I don't know. I mean, it's kind of crazy. I think that Yeah, there's no better peanut butter, and I don't even mean to gas myself up about that, but I only eat my peanut butter now.
Yeah. Yeah. So you said you sort of started this business as an accident. What did that look like? Can you share a little bit with us
Yeah.
on that?
So I think, and this is what led me to finding you and your services, because I was not that founder that said, oh, I have this business idea. Let me create a business plan. Here's the pricing. Here's what it's going to look like. This is my budget. That is not what it looked like at all. I don't have any of those things, which people ask me, oh, you don't have a business plan? No, I mean, I should make one now, I guess, but that's just not how it started. I was working for Erewhon. For listeners who don't know, it's a health food. I'm not going to say chain because that's the wrong word. Health food boutique grocer
Mm-hmm.
in Los Angeles. And there are 11 locations. And I was working for their corporate offices for almost 4 years, and I would make these protein bites that are now called berets, but these protein bites that were vegan and gluten free, and I just made them in my house, and I would give them to friends, and I'd post them on my Instagram, and just I was always eating them around 3-4 o'clock, kind of when I needed that sweet snack, that afternoon sweet tooth, and it just felt good on my body, and it was something that I made. And my boss kept looking over every day, and he's like, why are you eating the same thing every single day? What are those? And I said, oh, they're just my protein bites that I make from home. It's no big deal. And he said, oh, well, are you gonna share them? Like, I'd love to try them. I said, sure. So I brought them to him, and they were the original peanut butter flavor and what I would eat every single day. And he said, what are you doing? Like, you need to package these. Like, you need to sell these. And I thought he was absolutely out of his mind. I never in my life thought about packaging this product that I made for myself and I
Yeah.
made for my friends and family, which is exactly why the finances were not first. It was, how do I just get this product to market?
Mm-hmm.
And I just want to share my love for health and wellness with the world. It wasn't, how do I create a business?
Right.
It's just, how do I get people to try these protein bites? And so I listened to him. I went into a commercial kitchen. I was making them myself for
Okay.
the last for 2 months. About after 2 months, which is really not that long of making them myself, I was like, okay, I cannot keep my full-time job and do this at the same time. It was exhausting making my
Where were you selling them at that point?
own at Erewhon.
Okay, so
I was
directly into
directly.
retail at Erewhon.
Yep.
Okay.
I didn't even have a website. I didn't even have an online storefront. I was just dropping off at Erewhon. Then I launched at Jimbo's and Farm Shop and other like boutique cafes and coffee shops in LA, driving around and selling them. And the rest of the business is history. Once we found co-packers, which took a long time to find, but once we found co-packers, then I've been able to launch products more and more, and not do it myself anymore.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
you moved to a co-packer. At what point, how many years in were you when you and I started working together? And also, what sales channels were you selling in at that point?
So retail and online.
Okay.
We were already in distribution at that point. So it was recommended by Erewhon to get into distribution. And I think it's the necessary evil. I love my distributors that I work with. I will even shout them out, Foundation Foods, because I'm very honest about and like public about the fact that I love them.
Yeah.
So if you're a food brand listening and you're a small food brand who needs support to increase your distribution across the US, specifically California,
Mm-hmm.
Foundation Foods is a great partner. So I could not recommend them more. And they were recommended to me by Erewhon,
Okay.
saying this company is still onboarding, better for you brands that are startup phase, and still they can hold your hand.
Yeah.
in the process. And I think that's really key, is finding people that can hold your hand. And they did. I didn't know anything about distribution. I didn't know anything really about the food business, quite frankly. So they at that point. So
Yeah.
they really helped me out. I knew the food business on the Erewhon side. I didn't know it as well from the brand standpoint. So Foundation Foods really helped us out. And then when we started working together, Sarah, I onboarded with UNFI and Pod Foods, who are other distributors. But Foundation Foods was our first distribution partner.
Yeah, I will echo that. I think Foundation Foods is a really great partner here in SoCal, specifically the way they provide information, the way that they support people. And I've seen it across brands, different brands that I work with here. So yeah, I think that's a well-deserved shout out for sure.
They're just great people.
Yeah. And I remember, so from my point of view, when you reached out, it was like, I remember we were starting to make a forecast. We wanted to understand, we always do like a profit assessment first.
Yeah.
And that requires financials to be done for some period of time historically. And I think that's where we initially started to run into like a potential issue early on with working with you, where we could see that there were some things that weren't right, or maybe were missing, or just kind of wrong in your finances. And so it limited a little bit our ability to like really dive in and start analyzing the business. So remind me, like, I know you were looking specifically for some financial guidance from someone who had industry experience, but was like your like financials not being accurate part of why you came to me, or did we just discover that? I don't remember.
I believe we discovered that together. I think that what I was looking for was, again, that cross section between someone who's knowledgeable about finances and then also about the food business. Like, if you know anything about the food business, you know that the margins are really slim. And if you tell somebody else who's just an accountant and just does accounting or bookkeeping about the margins, they'd be like, ugh.
Yeah.
Ugh, that's rough. And I just was talking to my friend yesterday about something about our profit margins, and he's in the VC space in New York, and he goes, wow, that's like pretty good for the food business. And I was like, well, it's not good according to the rest of the population, but for the food business it is. And that is the crazy part, is that if you don't, and that's where I was feeling very alone, because there was no one telling me like, oh no, actually you're in the range for where a food business should be at your stage, which is scary, because of how razor blade thin the margins are. But and that's where I think there were issues. Again, it all goes back to the cross section that I mentioned at the beginning, which was, we had our books done, but it wasn't done by someone who knows the food business. So if there's any advice that I can offer to any founder who's in the food space, it's that whoever's doing your books should know what promotional chargebacks are, what trade spend is, what free fills are. And I was having to explain that to our previous bookkeeper. And that's where I needed your support, Sarah, because I couldn't necessarily understand how those charges in the food business impact our books. And you were that link. So thank you.
You're welcome. And to sort of, build on that a little bit for folks listening, we talk, I think, in episodes this season and in history, I think the second episode we ever aired, it was about financials, and it was about how, like, I remember way back then, it was like people would come to me, founders would come to me, and they'd be like, I'm frustrated because I don't understand my finances, or like, I don't understand how to use these numbers to make decisions. And when we would open the books and look at them, overwhelmingly, it would be like, well, they're not structured to help you. They're not, they might be just getting the job done for, tax purposes. But I think in your case and in other cases, like, they weren't even getting there. And, your bookkeeper at the time, I think, did their best to work with us to get it sorted out. We had a lot of work to do and really had to kind of pull it apart and put it back together, and just kind of be able to get, like, I'll say, like, last year's financials, like, sorted out and then be able to start to make some decisions. But all the while that work was going on, we were also digging into your products, the pricing on your products, the margin of your products, and like relationships that you were in where maybe like someone was asking you for like, hey, we need a bigger cut on this. We need you to lower your price. Or like, hey, we'd love to onboard you and your brand, but like these are the numbers we need. And so we did a lot of communicating and conversing on that front. And I feel like over time, like things really started to click with you and you sort of changed your outlook on some things.
And I thank you for saying that. And I wrote an email I specifically remember, and I was on the plane when I wrote this. And I said, I'm like midair, and I write on email, I don't know how it took me 4 years to understand this, but I finally understand it.
Yeah. And I think my response to that, I don't know what I responded to in that email specifically, but I think unfortunately that's the normal learning curve because of what you've already said. There is a lack of information out in the world, right? Is what we're trying to change here by having this conversation, by having this podcast, by having the Good Food CFO courses and all of that. It's like, how can we get this much needed information, demystify this industry, talk about the realities of finances, not just for food, the food industry as a whole, but specifically for small, better for you brands that need to make it through the first year, through the first 5 years, through 10 years to really have an impact, in your community and for yourself as a founder. And so it's like, yes, I know you're not alone. It's not unusual, but we're trying to change that and trying to make it faster,
And thank you. And so many people say that, to make it in the food business when you're a startup, it's at least 5 years of not making money. And it's like, why is that the norm? And it sucks, but like, it's hard to keep going and to keep yourself motivated. But I know that other brands have done it, so I can do it. I'm confident in that. But I think, there's so many nuances and to just quickly go back. Also, it's like to have that person who understands like, okay, you're invoicing a distributor for a certain amount of product. Why are you not receiving the full amount that you invoiced for? And you aren't in the food space. If the accountant doesn't understand the food business or the bookkeeper doesn't understand the food business, they will never grasp that concept of why you're not receiving the money that you invoiced for. And that's because there are store promotions where people think that, even you have a percentage off at the store, French Squirrel's on sale. Customers think that it's actually the store that's doing it, but it's not the store, it's the brand. And those are like the things that we need to demystify, or all those things like that.
Yeah. And by the way, the store is making their full value on that sale item. Like French Squirrel is paying the difference. I think that's the other thing too, right? It's like, and there's so many, myths from like the consumer side of things and like how they view what they think your margin is when you're selling at retail is like very different. But I think when you're entering into a food business for the first time, like you believe that too. Like, oh, I'll make 50% on everything that I sell and 50% is great and we're going to make a ton of money. And it's like, you just, you kind of slowly learn. And we're, like I said, trying to make that learning quicker and like on the front end of things, you know what I mean? But
yeah. And I think definitely. And before getting into this business, I was also guilty of thinking that it was the brand making the money, and how could that possibly be? $25 bag of granola on the shelf. How is that possible? Like, that's crazy.
Yeah.
But now knowing what's going on, like I totally understand that $25 bag of granola that's at Erewhon or Whole Foods or whatever it is. And so that shift that you're talking about, to get into what you were saying about pricing, this is a big one. It's a big one. And this is what took me 4 years to understand. I think that I was operating worried about the consumer so much, thinking, oh, they're not going to pay for that. They're not going to pay for that. Meanwhile, I was digging a hole for myself.
Yeah.
And the truth of the matter is French Squirrel can't stay in business if French Squirrel's not making money.
Yep.
And then this shift was, okay, I'm selling to all these retailers for this price. And it's a very, very thin margin. And I'm not technically losing money,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm not technically making enough money to produce another unit of the product, which is what I learned from your podcast as well. And that's something that I never understood.
Yeah.
Like, why is my cash flow not there? Why is it like so all over the place? It's because we're not losing, but we're not making enough to create another unit.
Yeah.
And so then what you helped me with, Sarah, was to understand of like the positioning of French Squirrel in the market as a luxury item. Like,
Yeah.
and what, this was the concept, debt tolerance.
Yes, that was very big.
Yes.
Yeah, for you. Yes.
And that is what Sydney, like me as the founder, is comfortable with to continue on in the business, knowing that the numbers may not be great right now and I just got to keep pushing forward. I don't operate that way.
Right.
So then knowing that I don't operate that way, advise to change the pricing model to say, no, French Squirrel is a luxury brand. We're not going to sell to retailers unless we're making more of a margin to be positive cash flow.
Yep.
So that was the shift. And I actually had to say no to a big customer because of that. And it was a really weird thing for me, but it kind of felt empowering, if I'm being honest.
Yeah. And I think we should share with people that this isn't something that like happened overnight necessarily, right? So we worked together for a year. Throughout that year, you know, as I sort of described, like you would email me, and I always encourage founders that I work with to do this. You would email me and you'd say, okay, I'm currently selling in this retailer. And, you know, you shared, you know, basically all of the financial information for that customer. And we could see exactly how profitable you were and like what your margins were after they took their fees and after shipping and after, you know, your cost of goods. And in this one particular instance, they wanted a higher margin on their end. And they were literally asking you to lower the price at which you sold to them. And it was like, you know, I don't advise that you do that. And here is why. And it's hard. And I think we need to like sit on that part of it for you where like, if you can remember that first time you emailed me about that business on the East Coast, and I think you were probably scared and you were probably nervous.
Yeah.
And potentially unsure about how do I now communicate to this customer, like the store that I'm in, that I would like to stay in for a number of reasons, but I can't do what they're asking me to do.
And it's getting over that. It's like that's also like my people pleasing part of myself, or like the fear of losing the account.
Yeah.
I had to get over that. And about another customer as well, I asked you, is it weird to show them what my costs are? Like I almost, because I felt so empowered, I just wanted to share. And I think so many retailers appreciate it actually, where I say, this is how much it costs us to ship it here. We need to make something work. And then that retailer said, oh, well, we're happy to split the shipping with you actually.
Is that the one that happened toward the end of our working together?
Yes.
Amazing. Okay. So I want to dive a little bit deeper into this because
the one that we were talking about towards the end, that big retailer, I decided not to work with them.
Okay.
I shared transparently the costs and the margins, and they said no.
Okay, so let's talk about both of these things. Okay, so much to like dive into here.
Yeah.
So you were transparent you started to become transparent over time. And I remember, I think that the first email, the one that I was talking about with that East Coast, you know, customer, it was like, and sometimes it's like my CFO says we can't do that. And I totally accept that. Like, I'm always like, just blame me. You know what I mean? Just blame me. That's totally fine. But also it's like, you know, we can't do that. And here's why, you know, or like, and that seemed to work when you explained to them like why you couldn't do what they were asking.
They understand.
right? You definitely had to practice the muscle of being okay if they said, well, then we can't work with you anymore, which is extremely, extremely frightening. And I totally get that and have compassion for that. But this last one we're kind of talking about. So, big opportunity that came to you after a convention.
Yes.
You started to work with them and they came back and they were like, we want to bring on more product. And,
Yeah.
you know,
The
and
whole
you
line.
emailed me and you said, here's what I'm thinking. Is it like, is it inappropriate? I can't remember the exact wording, but to basically be transparent with them about why we would need to raise the price on this first product that we had gone in on and what the pricing would need to be on the rest. And my feedback to you was like, no, I think that that's a great idea so that they know why you're asking for what you're asking
Right.
for. It's not just a money grab. You're like literally need to earn a
Yes.
certain margin.
It was great advice, and it was really great practice to make that table. Again, I was on the plane, I had zero distractions, I was dialed into this Excel spreadsheet, and I was just toggling with the numbers, like pennies, changing it from 29 cents to 39 cents to 49 cents, like anything to show them. And this is like what the food industry is pennies,
Yeah.
literally pennies. I'm toggling with these numbers on the Google sheet just to show them how detailed I want to be and how much I want to work with them, that I'm actually willing to show you what my cost is, which
Yeah.
is a lot of people don't share it. They don't want the retailer to know, but I wanted them to know that I was trying everything to make it work and to show them that, the chocolate market went up 91+% since the beginning of 2024, and we cannot make it work unless it's, we're selling it to you at this price. And I showed them their margin and my margin. And I had a friend over last night, as I said, who works in VC, and he was telling me he doesn't understand how I could turn down the opportunity because the food business is scale, it's volume. And I said, well, it's not worth what I have to put myself through, and like the debt tolerance, as we were talking about, to barely make anything and
Yeah.
continue producing and not getting that cash back into the business. I didn't know the proper response, really, because you're not technically losing money.
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
what people don't understand.
Yeah. And so was that potential partner not willing to meet you where you needed to be?
No.
Yeah.
And
And
thank you. We will revisit in the future.
I think that that's a great thing, right? First of all, I want to like again say this out loud, and I said this in the email, that I was really like proud and excited that you had reached this point where you're like, I'm fully okay walking away. I'm fully okay being transparent because that's what I need to do for my business, my risk tolerance, right? My
Yes,
cash
like
flow
for
right
me,
now. Mm-hmm.
like it makes me feel good as the founder to actually share it transparently.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
And I think going in with that, I actually coined a term that I haven't said on the podcast yet, but I called it a negotiation, because you weren't going in to negotiate with them. You were laying it all out on the table and saying, I want to work with you. Here's what we would need to make it work. Can you do this or not? And it's not to say that you wouldn't have had a conversation with them about maybe
Yeah,
we choose these products and not the other ones, but I think that the industry needs more transparency. And I think the more times founders share that information with retailers, large and small, the more educated they become, and there will eventually be shifts, right, in
right.
how this whole thing works.
Because exactly. And I didn't, when I was working for Erewhon, I didn't know how much it costs, like for a food business to create a product, and especially one that's not at scale. We make
Yeah.
everything still in small batches. So it was also, I think, maybe hopefully a learning and educational piece for that retailer to see actually how much does it cost French Squirrel to make that.
Yeah.
And I bet you that buyer thought it was way less
Yeah.
than what it actually costs. And
Yeah.
so one door closes, another door opens. But I think, yeah, a lot of people don't understand that. Again, like, oh, well, you're not technically losing money, so why wouldn't you
Yeah.
go into that retailer? But this is where we did that work together, which is that yes, you're technically not losing money, but in the grand scheme of things, it's not helping
Yeah. Yeah.
either.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So big learning, and thank you for like being willing to dive into that
Mhm.
here with me. I want to touch on, the fact that you, through the work and through, specific customers and things, and once the finances were done, you arrived at this place where you were like, Sarah, I think we need to raise the prices. And I think this is where we need to raise them. And you had created a spreadsheet, and we saw what your margins would be like in each channel. Can
Yeah.
you talk a little bit about, like, there's like a couple things I want you to hit on here. One is like that process and what it was like to kind of officially go, okay, I need to raise the prices. And then two, thinking back to the previous Sydney, the earlier days Sydney, who felt like, oh, I can't charge more than X for my product, how it turned out after you raised your prices.
Okay, great question, because now we have data on that actually
Amazing.
over the last 2 months. It was only 2 months ago that we did this, so it's very new. Again, I think it was the previous Sydney was operating in the mindset of like external approval, like this product, people won't buy it
Yeah.
if I raise the price more, which was the wrong attitude. I mean, people that know French Squirrel, that know me, that know the quality and the authenticity of the products, because I really do care. I taste every single ingredient. Everything has, intentionality behind it. And so, and we're manufacturing at small scale. So it's not as cheap as everybody thinks it is in the food
Mm-hmm.
business. It's like, oh, little package of cereal, haha. That shift came about probably because, again, I didn't start this off saying I'm going to start a business. It was, let me bring these protein bites to market. It started off as a passion, and it wasn't like, how do I sell this business for millions of dollars? Like, that's
Right.
not what the intention was. I don't know when I came to you, when I think I had a realization. It was like a light bulb moment when we talked about the above 50% margin, cash flow positive. I was like, aha, like I've priced everything wrong.
Mm.
I haven't priced it enough where I get more cash in the bank to be able to produce another item again. And that's
Yeah.
where there were issues. And then I remember people trying to tell me, it wasn't even you, it was other people, friends, family. Well, there's like the psychology of pricing, and instead of making the dates $10.99, you should make it $9.99. And
Yeah.
I was like, no, I reached a point where I actually didn't even care anymore. And I don't mean that in a
Yeah.
in a bad way. I care.
Yeah.
It was just like, my hands are up now. I've been in business for 4 years. If I want to continue this business, for those customers who are messaging me how they can't live without my products,
Right.
which is so amazing, and I have this loyal community, in order to actually serve them, I have to raise the price.
Yeah.
So it's not, oh, I'm raising this price in spite of them, like saying, oh, well, I have to actually, to serve them, I have to raise the price, because
Yep.
otherwise French Squirrel can't stay in business. So that was my shift. I was like, I don't care about the psychology of pricing and numbers. I don't care. I put it at $10.99, even though it's technically, they say, oh, well, once you go above 10, it's like the red zone. I don't know what that means. If people like the product, they like the product, and they don't care about, there is
Yeah.
psychology of pricing, yes,
Sure.
but there's a time and place for that, and French Squirrel is not there.
Right.
Worry about the psychology of pricing. So I put it at $10.99 for 3 dates, stuffed with
Yeah.
peanut butter coated in chocolate, and my sales have been just fine,
Good.
and they've actually gone up at Erewhon,
Amazing.
which is so beyond me. But people, it's actually something, a concept that my friend Lex from Lexington Bakes, he does brownies and
Yeah.
cookies at Erewhon. And it's called pattern disruption.
Mm.
Because you look at all the other protein bites and dates, or well, not dates, refrigerated desserts, $2.99, $3.99, $4.99, whatever. Again, $2.99, $6.49, whatever, and then you're like, $10.99. That's crazy. What about this makes it $10.99? And it's a
Yeah.
pattern disruption.
That's really interesting to think about.
Right?
Yeah.
That's where
Yeah.
I'm at. And I don't know, I reached this point of, I don't know what the word is. I don't mean to say I don't care anymore. That's not what it is.
Yeah.
It's this like, I'm done playing it to like worry about what other people are willing to pay in order to stay in business. I actually have to worry about French Squirrel.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a great place to arrive. You know, and it does take time to get there. And it does take understanding your numbers to get there, right? To know what that price needs to be. But let's also talk about the other side of that, because this is not a situation where you were just like, everything's going to stay as is and we're going to raise the price. You also really dug in and did some work around how your product was being produced and who was producing that product for you. So can you share a little bit about that journey?
Yes. So that has been huge. And so, we found new co-manufacturing partners, thank God. And my foot was on the gas pedal for months interviewing different co-manufacturers. Like you almost have to like date them, they say.
Yeah.
That's what it is, because it's not about even the number, the price. It's like the people. Like I'm such an energy person, and I have to work with people that I enjoy working with and that also believe in our products. Yeah, lowering the cost of goods is also part of it, obviously.
Yeah.
Finding the right partners who will say stuff, who will talk in the future. And again, this is why it's like dating. Because like, when a guy or girl, whatever, likes you or not, when they say, oh, like in 2 months or something, like I'm going to this concert, like I'd love to go with you. Like those are the signals, like it's funny, but it's true. And so I look for that. And that's, I think, another piece of advice, that when people are asking, what do you look for when you look for a co-packer? The price is one thing. It's actually the messaging. Are they talking about where they want to go?
Yeah.
And so I found new manufacturers. They are great people. I'm so excited to work with them. And even we're getting a great price for my knowledge of the industry, which again, I didn't know before. So we're getting a good price. Is it the best price? No.
Right.
It's not nearly where I want to be. Not even close.
Right.
I need to be much lower, and I know that we can get there. And I got an email yesterday where I was negotiating on certain packaging fees and labor tolling for everyone listening, which is like the labor cost of making the product. And they are not willing to go down. They're not budging at all. But where I saw, the light in the email is they wrote me, we don't co-manufacture for brands we don't believe in. They verbatim wrote this. We see where your brand is going. I know that my word doesn't mean much, like it's because it's just words.
Yeah.
They said they want me to know that they will reevaluate the pricing after the first few purchase orders, and they will do anything they can to cut wherever they see and to make it better because they see my vision. They wrote that on email.
Right.
And I read it and I smiled, and I'm like, you know what? It's not the best pricing today, but they're talking about the future, and that's all that matters.
Yeah. And it is better pricing though than what you had before.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I wouldn't have moved otherwise.
Yeah. It's like there was a bit of an incentive aside from the relationship like piece, but you're totally right that is huge. And I think, something that I again, was like, Sydney is doing the work here, right? It was like, you could have just said, we're raising the price and everything else is what it is. But you're like, okay, we're going to raise the price because that's something that will help. We're also going to investigate how can we maintain the quality of our product, because that's like a non-negotiable for you, but get a lower price. Like,
Right.
who can produce it more efficiently, or whatever like the things are. And I think something that you exhibit consistently is consistency in, I need a new co-packer. I know that I need a new co-packer. I don't know who it's going to be. I don't know when I'm going to find them, but I'm going to put in the work.
I think I said it like 20 times. I said it so much on our call because I firmly believe that's what it comes down to.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry if I said it 12 million times on our calls for the last year. I finally did it.
Yeah. And I think consistency is a difficult thing for people just in general, right?
Yeah.
And I think especially in business, we're like, oh, I should be at this revenue point. I should be making this much money. I should be. And it's like, well, you can't totally live in the future. You have to live in the present. And where am I right now? And what do I need to do right now to, to get there? And other places I've seen consistency for you, not just in, finding a co-packer and staying committed to that process, but also committed to understanding and having conversations with me about, what can I do on pricing here? Right.
Yeah.
And not just going, ugh, Sarah always says no, and so I'm not going to email her anymore. Or, you know what I mean? All the way to like your social media consistency. I think something else you talked to me about is like, we're trying to sell on TikTok and I'm just going to keep on posting and see how it goes. And like, I saw not too long ago, you had like a video with over 1 million views. Yeah. It's like,
it's so crazy. So crazy. Thank you. I think it's I don't know how, this is how I've been since I was little. I don't know. When I want something, I'll do anything to get it. And I think it's just, I don't know, it's discipline, consistency, because people are like, oh, well, how do you stay motivated? I'm like, I don't think it's motivation. It's not motivation. It's just discipline.
Yeah.
Consistency. And I hired an assistant, which was huge. Shout out Catherine. Love her, because I needed her support when I was in that consistency phase still with finding a co-packer. I did nothing else besides take co-packer calls and call and make spreadsheets and try to find people and take more send product and talk to them on the phone. I did nothing else for a month, I think. And I told Catherine, I want you to handle everything else. This is all I'm doing for the next month until I find someone.
Yeah. I love that. It's amazing.
But yeah, the social media thing is hard too. But I think also for food businesses listening, e-com is where it's at. We know that. It's just the margins are better.
Yeah. Or and balance too. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. So I want to talk a little bit about like the end of our working together. So through working together, we trudged through and sorted out the finances. We onboarded you with a bookkeeper who has knowledge in the food industry and could sort of, pick up and make things good in your numbers. You had come to this place where you had changed your pricing, essentially hadn't fully rolled out yet, but you were, the moves were being made. You were on this mission to find the right co-packer, that, the next co-packer, for you and to improve your margins even further. And our contract was coming to an end. And I remember coming to you and saying like, I feel like you're in a good place. And you were like, I do too. And it was like, you knew what the things you needed to focus on were. And I also felt really confident that you knew how to talk to potential customers to do the work that we were doing together, you could now do on your own.
Yes. No, thank you. And I completely agree. I think we were on the same page, but it just took you like saying it to like kind of like, the to let the bird fly like out of the nest.
Yeah.
I think that's exactly true. It wasn't just about the position of the business finances. It was like, no, actually, like I now know how to how to write emails to
Yep.
retailers to say, this price isn't working. We're going to have to increase the price. And so thank you for giving me the confidence to do that. And yeah, I think it's, it's like a seesaw, like taking the cost down, raising the prices. Like I was doing both of those, and I just think I didn't have the knowledge before. And again, that's why it made me feel stupid to be like, what? And I hate to say that, but I was just
Yeah.
like, why did it take me 4 years to get this concept of making enough money to sell? And I don't know why. And it was
Because
like,
no one teaches that.
no
Like
one,
I'll what did you say, like
yeah,
to toot my own horn? I forget what phrase you used earlier, but like the reality is no one is talking about that. Like I don't know anyone else who's talking about it except me. And I don't know if I ever shared this story with you, but like the first time I actually understood that to be true
yes.
was pre 2020. We were doing co-working. Myself, I don't even think didn't have the podcast yet. I was doing co-working with like 3 other women, and one of the women owned a business, not a food business. It was like a product business. And she was like, Sarah, I don't understand why I'm not making any money. Like I'm selling through all the
Yeah.
product that is being made, and they're profitable products, but like I'm not having any money. And she was selling at exactly a 50% margin. And so we modeled it out, and I was like, okay, so you bought this, you made this money, that money goes to make the next round, you make another 50%, that money goes, and we like ran it out. And I was like, I think you don't make any money until you stop. Because when you stop, then you're not making another round of product and you get to keep it. But like essentially, you're just making the amount of money that you would get from one sale. So if you just like made product, sold it all that product one time and quit, you'd make money.
Yeah, yes. And that's the concept that took so long to understand. But as a small growing business, you can't not have inventory. And
Yes.
that's the weird concept of like, and no one is talking about that.
Yeah.
And
And
so,
I will say that it took me, like, I'd have to go back and look at the date of the podcast that's called Rethinking Cash Flow. It took me from pre 2020, because we were working together until that hit. So, and it might have even been like 2018 when I like understood that. I didn't say that to anyone, and I didn't say it out loud until that podcast aired.
wow.
And it was because this person had asked a question and was like, why don't I have money? Like the
Yeah, yeah,
same
yeah.
thing. I'm selling a profitable product, but I
Listen,
don't have any money to run the business. I have to invest more money. And I sat with that email for such a long time. And then I was like, I think I have to share this, because I thought I was wrong. I thought, like, how could I be right? How is no one else saying this? How can I have like uncovered this way of thinking that like I must be wrong? I doubted myself.
right, right. It's changed my whole everything around the business. It was like the biggest light bulb when I remember, and I'm like, what have I been doing for the last 4 years? Like, really, what have I been doing?
And I think, something we talk about, like the like traditional business media and people who are not in the food industry, like the advice that they would give you is like, 30% margin is like even fine. Like as long as you have positive gross margin,
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
like it's okay. And it's like we've talked about this, like, yes, you can like build a business with that margin, but it's going to take a lot of debt, right? And
Yes.
like that's the piece that people don't talk about, is like, sure, you could do it, but the sort of repercussions or the needs are going to be heavy investment. And like you said earlier, it's like, were you okay with that? What
Yeah.
was your risk
And that's what
tolerance?
my friend was saying yesterday. I did not understand how I could say no to a retailer if it was a 30% margin.
Right.
And I said, because I don't want to deal with that anymore.
Yeah.
With the debt tolerance and scrambling and being so and being anxious and worried about what's going on. Why am I not making money? And that is not worth it, because I realize, and this is like a whole like personal side to it. And you had the pleasure, Sarah, of like getting to know my dad.
Yep.
And and I dealt with a lot of health issues the last couple of months, and his idea, his thought process, and he's right. I made myself almost sick about the finances.
Mm,
And I'm not saying it was the cause necessarily of
right.
the health issues, but it's not worth it to, he's right, to be sick over this concept of not making money.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't handle it. Like Sydney personally, my mental health, my physical health can't handle it because it literally showed up on my body. Like
Yeah.
I was not well, and I had to go through a whole like healing journey, which is another side thing. Anyway, you can look at my personal Instagram and TikTok for that. But everything's fine now, but it was caused by stress of
Yeah.
this debt and not having to, I have to lend myself money and borrow money from here in order to make this work.
Yeah.
So like my answer to like that friend who doesn't understand why I wouldn't sell for a 30% margin, it's like Sydney can't do it, like
Yeah.
I can't do it,
Yeah. That's
you
such a
know.
great message to share because I think a lot of founders will go, but this is what I'm supposed to do. And
Yeah,
if I'm a true entrepreneur, if I'm a true founder, then I should be able to handle it. Like that's what we do. And you quote unquote need to raise millions of dollars to have a CPG business. You don't. You can do it a different way,
yeah,
right? Like,
absolutely.
I had a conversation with someone the other day where they were like, I won't make money in this business until I sell it. And I was like, is
Mm,
that like, do you actually believe that? Or are you just repeating something that people have said?
that's what
And
everybody.
they were like, well, I don't know if I even want to sell it, but I know that I want to make money. And I was like, well, you can't like,
Yeah,
there's so many things that like you get to decide, but
yeah.
it's that key understanding of like the numbers and your branding and it all comes together and you, right? It all
To
comes together.
who's behind, like I'm not saying I am French Squirrel, I'm Sydney, but like I'm running it.
Yeah.
And if like I'm not, and my business coach Lauren always says like if Sydney's not well, French Squirrel is not well. Like it is
Yeah.
one and the same. And so
Yeah.
and you help me identify that. Like some founders are okay with all this lending money and borrowing money, and it's okay if we're not, making money this month because da da da. I was like, oh my god, my nervous system is collapsing.
Yeah. Yeah.
No.
Yeah. And I remember you were like, I never get sick. And then you had like,
Yes.
you were
Remember
showing up to
that?
calls and you just weren't feeling well for a
And I
while.
thought it was allergies, and it was not allergies.
Yeah.
Remember
Yeah.
that?
Yeah.
It was crazy.
You're like, it's not going away. Yeah.
Going
Yeah.
away.
Well, I'm glad that you're feeling better now. And I'm glad we had the experience of working together.
Too.
It was really wonderful from my perspective as well. And a big fan of French Squirrel, big fan of yours. We'll continue following along and buying the delicious products that you make, especially that peanut butter. And I will say, like, I'll add to this, like, I had not good peanut butter. You can't really see it on screen.
Oh,
I break out when I have not good peanut butter. Like, I literally ate your jar of peanut butter in like a week because it's so good.
oh my
And I
god.
never broke out. It's like this quality of product that is coming from a good source that's made really well. Like it does actually, for me, it impacts my body in a positive way as opposed to how other foods don't. So thank you for creating such a great product.
Thank you, and thank you for that feedback. It's actually one of our main customer feedbacks on that product. Like feedback, is that, can you say feedback plural?
That
No,
works. Yeah.
feedback, whatever. Let's cut that. It's one of our main customer reviews is actually that it doesn't make them break out the peanut butter.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people say, oh, I don't do peanuts or I don't do peanut butter because it makes me break out. It's actually that it's a lack of knowledge on the food industry as well.
Mm-hmm.
Because most peanut butter that's on shelf, like from these big brands, it was produced such a long time ago, meaning it's sitting on shelf and it's old. And
Right.
so the benefit of, supporting small businesses again is that like French Squirrel made that a week ago and it's
Yeah.
on shelf. And
Yeah.
that's why it's such high quality, because it's small batch and it's real ingredients and there aren't stabilizers and preservatives making it last longer. Like
Yeah.
it was just made. It's fresh.
Yeah. And I will say too, when I say I ate bad peanut butter, it wasn't that I just like got like a cheapo brand of peanut butter.
Yeah.
Like I paid, you know what I mean? It was supposedly organic, like, but it just, you test it out, you see how you go. And this was like a week of consuming a little bit every day. And I was like, oh, I have to stop. My body is like, this is not working.
Yeah.
So yeah. So I appreciate
Yep.
you sharing that. It's really interesting information. If people want to learn more about French Squirrel, want to check out your products, where can they do that?
Yes. So we have our website, FrenchSquirrel.com, where you can buy our products. Also Amazon and on TikTok Shop as well. And on social media, Instagram, FrenchSquirrel.co. And I'm a big LinkedIn fan as well. Personally, I post a lot as a founder on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
And yeah, if you're in Los Angeles, we sell to Erewhon and Bristol Farms, Lazy Acres, Mothers. And then if you're in New York, we sell to Pop-Up Grocer, Matchaful. We're also in the Fresh Market in down south, East Coast, and so many more retailers. But yeah.
Yeah, amazing. And if someone wants to follow along on your journey, because on your personal Instagram, you do share a lot of behind the scenes, which I think it sort of extends this conversation. Where can they find you on social?
So, Sydney_KW. So
Amazing.
on Instagram and on TikTok, which is where I share more of like the health journey stuff and also like the behind the scenes of the business. Like visited my manufacturers 2 days ago and I was showing everyone everything. So that was fun.
Yeah. Did someone there have a French accent?
At the facility?
At the co-packer?
Oh,
yeah.
No, but it was a foreign accent.
Okay.
Not French. I don't know. I'm forgetting where she's from, but that's so funny that you heard that.
It was like very, very brief. And I was like, was that French? I was like, what are the odds?
No, but that would be funny.
Yeah.
Not French. I'm just forgetting where she's from.
Well, thank you so much, Sydney, for your time today. What an amazing conversation. I really appreciate you.
Great. Thank you, Sarah. I appreciate it.
Looking for more content like this? Subscribe to our YouTube channel. You'll see weekly podcast episodes as well as other content related to the show. Just visit youtube.com/@thegoodfoodcfo.
Thank you for joining us here today. If you enjoyed this episode or found it helpful or inspiring in any way, please share it with your founder friends on social and rate and review the podcast wherever you listen. It's the #1 way to help good food founders find the show. We'll be back with a brand new episode next week.